For creatures who are made up of mostly water, we oftentimes fail to see just how our own personal real-life timelines look just like the waves of the sea. We have our good days and we have our bad days. But to suggest that God had to kill your grandfather so that you can learn a valuable lesson in life, it's a bit harsh. I mean, when you really think about it, this is the type of logic and reasoning that I grew up with within religion, that oftentimes when someone died, especially if it was tragedy, a tragic or sudden death or something like that, is oftentimes framed as, well, this is God's way of showing us some deeper meaning or some valuable lesson in life. But when you stop and think about it, I mean, really think about it, what loving father would actually kill somebody in order to teach their children that he loves very much a lesson that, quite honestly, you would learn that lesson anyway without the killing as you get older? So a child dies of a long bout of cancer. He's working for my good. Someone who's been suffering most of their lives with high blood pressure. He's working for my good. Someone who survives a childhood that was filled with all kinds of abuse. He's working for my good. A person that loses a spouse due to an accident, a sudden accident. He's working. You see, this is why religion works so well with slavery, because it allowed these evil slave masters to justify to their slaves that, hey, listen, the reason why I'm doing these things is to teach you a lesson. It's to show you how much I really do care about you, by doing these evil things to you. But it's my way of showing my care and compassion. So the point I'm trying to make here is simple, is that it shows just how cold and harsh Christianity can really be when you sit down to really think about it. These are things I know for myself. I'd never thought of these things until now, when I sit back and realize, man, this is what we were telling people. I mean, telling a small child that, okay, the reason why God took away your father was to teach you a lesson so that you can learn how to be a better man later on in life. It's reeks of everything that a slave master would have told his own young slaves. I mean, it's the same as the explanations we oftentimes would have given to people who have suffered years and years of abuse in their homes, that we try to explain it, well, the reason why you went through that abuse is because God was preparing you for something. I mean, think about this for a second. I mean, really think about this. What loving father would sit back and allow his children to be abused so as a way of preparing them to do some work in life? Think about that for a second. I mean, really think about that before you run into the comments and dump a whole bunch of scriptures. I want you to think about that as a human being. What loving parent would subject their children to abuse, to torture, or whatever it is that they've gone through, as a way of training them to be a better version of themselves as they get older? Life in of itself can be filled with moments of great joy, happiness, tenderness, and love. But just like that, it can all switch just like that to a time of great pain, suffering, and sadness. Again, think of the wave. But what makes life so beautiful is how we as individuals have to figure out how to navigate through these weird waters that sometimes they're looking very good and then sometimes they're not. But somehow we got to figure out, we got to put ourselves together and say, you know what? I'm not sinking today. Today is not my day to sink. I got to figure it out. And so to sit back and to watch how people have to figure things out, and a lot of times people do, how to navigate through these waters, that in of itself writes for a beautiful picture or a beautiful story that oftentimes can be a help and blessing to many people. That in of itself is the beauty that life ultimately gives. I mean, so life itself is one big learning experience. In case you haven't figured that out by now, we are literally every day waking up, going to sleep, waking back up again in this lifelong school that we've just been born into. And it's going to be filled with all of these different experiences. And so instead of scaring ourselves and each other and our children with this rationale or this mindset that somehow that there's this ominous force that's out there that's ready to hit this switch to all of a sudden take all of that away because this force is trying to teach you something, or or maybe trying to punish you because you got so much rebellion in your heart. So he's got to take your parents away, or he's got to make you sick, or he's got to, do this or that or whatever. Instead of teaching that, why not begin to understand that this is just life? I mean, when you look at animals, for example, even animals have good days and bad days as well. This is the nature of life in of itself. It's just life is full of all of these different experiences. And the problem with when we sit back and say, well, ultimately he's the one that's working it out. It's this God or whatever that's doing this for us. What that really does, the danger of that is it takes away the incentive for people, you and I, to begin to, as we're navigating through these things, to actually be fully invested in learning from these different obstacles that we had to navigate so that we can become a better version of ourselves. Because what happens is, what religion does is it tells you, honey, just sit down, and just relax because he ultimately is in control. You don't have to do anything. And there's so many people that I've encountered in my own life within the religious world who have this mindset. They believe that you just sit back and just let things be what they are, and eventually the storm will pass and everything's going to be fine. But very few people that I have encountered within a religious space ever take the time to learn from those ups, ebbs, and flows that we go through, and they don't address those things. It's like maybe there's things in your family, maybe there's decisions that have to be made. And what a lot of times religious people do is that they will buffer themselves from the reality of, okay, I have to course correct. Okay, I got to do this, I got to do that. Instead of doing that, they buffer themselves with all kinds of religious quotations and scriptures and all kinds of stuff. And then they end up going through the same cycles over and over again while they sit back and say, well, honey, he's just working it out for me. Nobody's working that out. You're going to continue to go through some of these same things over and over again. That's life until you get it right. That's just what life is. And what religion does, as I was saying, it takes away our own self-motivation to when we need to drop the anchor, when we need to set sail, when we need to tighten the sails, when we need to loosen the sails, or sometimes when we need to row. It takes away our motivation to be intricately involved in that process so that we can kind of navigate through this thing called life. It's time to wake up.